I walked into my own engagement party, a night that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, only to hear my fiancé and his best friend laughing in the hallway about how they managed to settle for the ugly girl just to get to my father's inheritance. My heart didn't just break. It shattered into a million jagged pieces as I stood there, clutching the wall, listening to the man I loved tell his friends that he'd have to keep the lights off for the rest of his life just to stomach looking at me. I have spent my entire life being the girl who hides in the back of photos, the one who wears oversized hoodies to disappear, and the one who finally thought she found someone who saw her soul instead of her skin. But in that one moment, every insecurity I'd ever had was validated in the cruelest way possible. I realized then that I wasn't just a person to him. I was a transaction, a charity case with a bank account. I'm standing here now months later, with the satisfaction of knowing I took everything from him. But I have to ask you all honestly, was I too cold-hearted for the way I dismantled his entire life? Or would you have burned it all down too if the person you trusted most called you a monster behind your back? Tell me, do you think I went too far, or did he get exactly what he deserved? To understand how I got to that hallway, you have to understand what it's like to grow up as the unfortunate sister. My sister, Elena, is a literal goddess, tall, blonde, and effortlessly beautiful. Growing up, the contrast was unbearable. At family gatherings, relatives would gush over Elena's model looks, and then turn to me with a sympathetic pat on the head, telling me I had a great personality, or was so smart. Those are the polite ways of telling a child they are unattractive. By the time I hit puberty, it got worse. I inherited my father's rugged, heavy features and my mother's struggle with cystic acne that left deep, pitted scars across my cheeks and jawline. I wasn't just the plain sister. I was the one people looked at with genuine pity, as if my face was a tragedy they had to witness. I learned early on to hide my face behind thick layers of hair, to wear baggy clothes that masked any semblance of a silhouette, and to never, ever look someone directly in the eyes for too long. My father, a very successful real estate developer, tried to overcompensate by giving me everything money could buy: designer bags, private tutors, trips to Europe. But you can't buy a new face or the confidence that comes with it. I spent thousands on dermatologists and laser treatments, but the damage was deep, both physically and emotionally. I remember sitting in those sterile clinics, the smell of antiseptic filling my lungs, as doctors poked and prodded at my skin with needles and light therapy, promising results that never quite made me feel like the girls on the billboards. My mother would hold my hand, her eyes filled with a sadness she couldn't hide, which only made me feel more like a broken project that needed fixing. By the time I hit my mid-20s, I had resigned myself to a life of solitude, buried in my work as a data analyst. I was good at numbers because numbers didn't judge me. They didn't whisper when I walked by. I found comfort in the cold, hard logic of spreadsheets and algorithms. In the digital world, I was a ghost, a nameless force that solved complex problems, and I liked it that way. I stayed late at the office just to avoid the social pressure of happy hours and networking events where I felt like a sore thumb. That was until I met Mark. Mark was charming, handsome, and seemingly perfect. He was a junior executive at a firm we consulted for, and when we met at a corporate gala, I expected him to look right through me to the prettier girl standing behind me. But he didn't. He looked at me. He stayed by the buffet table with me for 3 hours, talking about everything from market trends to 90s grunge music. He listened to me. He told me that my scars were just maps of where I'd been, and that he found my intelligence and my dry wit more attractive than any physical trait. I remember crying in my car after our third date, because I couldn't believe someone like him could actually want someone like me. I felt like a late bloomer in a garden of roses, finally finding someone who appreciated a wildflower. I fell for it. I fell for him so hard that I became blind. I didn't notice how he always insisted on meeting my father for casual business advice over expensive scotch. I didn't notice how he subtly encouraged me to distance myself from my few protective friends, claiming they were jealous of our connection. I didn't notice that he never took photos with me unless my father was also in the frame. Within a year, he proposed in front of both our families. My father was skeptical. He knew the world of business and knew how men hunted for dowries, but he saw the light in my eyes, a light that had been dim for 25 years, and he agreed to the union. He even went as far as setting up a massive multi-million-dollar trust fund for us as a wedding gift, thinking he was securing my future happiness. The night of the engagement party was supposed to be my debut, the moment I finally stepped out of the shadows. I had spent months preparing. I spent thousands on a custom silk dress that hugged me in all the right places, and I hired a professional makeup artist who spent 4 hours using every trick in the book to hide the imperfections of my skin. For a few hours, as I stood under the crystal chandeliers of the ballroom, I actually felt beautiful. I walked around, shaking hands and smiling, feeling like I had finally escaped the curse of being the ugly girl. I felt like a princess. I remember Mark leaning in to whisper that I looked breathtaking. And for once, I didn't look for a sarcastic edge in his voice. But then, I went to find Mark to share a quiet moment. I saw him slip into a private study with his best friend, Jackson, and a few of his other fraternity brothers. I followed them, wanting to steal a private kiss away from the prying eyes of the crowd. I stopped at the heavy oak door when I heard Jackson's loud, boisterous laugh. "Man, Mark, I gotta hand it to you," Jackson said. "I don't know how you do it." I couldn't wake up to that every morning, no matter how much money her old man has. I mean, those scars. It looks like she fought a lawnmower and lost. My blood ran cold. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tightness that made it hard to breathe. I stood there, frozen, waiting for Mark to defend me. I waited for him to tell Jackson to shut up, to say he loved me, to say I was beautiful to him. Instead, I heard Mark let out a long, weary sigh that sounded like he was carrying the weight of the world. "God, Jackson, don't remind me," Mark said, his voice dripping with a disgust I'd never heard before. "It's a sacrifice, okay? Think of it like a job. A very high-paying, very gross job. I just close my eyes and think about the Porsche I'm buying the day after the wedding. I think about the beach house and the early retirement. Besides, once we're married and the papers are signed, I'll just pay for her to get some massive, reconstructive plastic surgery, so I don't have to look at those craters on her face anymore. For now, I just tell her she's naturally beautiful and she eats it up like a hungry dog. She's so desperate for love and attention that she'll believe literally anything I say. It's almost too easy." The other guys laughed, and one of them made a comment about how he should get a bonus for the honeymoon. I couldn't move. I felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed me whole. I looked at my reflection in a nearby gilded mirror. The expensive makeup, the dress, the hopeful eyes, and all I saw was the pathetic, ugly girl they were laughing at. I felt like a fool. Every sweet word he'd said to me was a calculated lie. Every touch was a performance for a paycheck. I wanted to scream, to burst in there and throw my drink in his face, but as I stood there, a cold, hard resolve suddenly took over. The tears that were stinging my eyes didn't fall. I realized that if I confronted him then, he'd just lie his way out of it, apologize and try to salvage the deal. No, he wanted my money and he hated my face. I was going to make sure he lost every cent and never forgot my face for as long as he lived. I turned around, walked back into the party, and for the next 3 hours, I was the perfect, glowing fiancé. I laughed at his jokes, I leaned into his touch, and I even toasted to our forever. Inside, I was already dismantling his life. The very next day, I began the process of vetting the investment Mark was so excited about. I played the role of the doting, insecure woman who needed her big strong man to help her handle the family's complex finances. I told Mark that my father was so impressed with him that he wanted to bring him into the family business as a primary partner before the wedding. I told him we needed to sign some premarital paperwork to merge our assets for a massive, once-in-a-lifetime real estate investment that would triple our net worth in months. Mark, blinded by his own greed and his absolute arrogance that I was too stupid and desperate to see through him, didn't even read the fine print. He thought he was signing a document that gave him joint access to my trust. In reality, he was signing a series of high-risk personal guarantees and indemnity waivers that tied his own meager savings, his family's small estate, and his entire credit future to a failing shell company I had identified through my data analysis work. A company that was about to go bankrupt due to several undisclosed lawsuits. I even hired a fake consultant to present the numbers to him, ensuring he felt like a financial genius for discovering this opportunity. I watched him sign those papers with a smug grin, his eyes practically turning into dollar signs. I also started confiding in him about my insecurities more, intentionally making him look at my face up close under bright lights while I asked for reassurance about my skin. I would ask him to describe every detail of why he loved me, forcing him to weave elaborate lies while I recorded them all. I watched his eyes flicker with revulsion as he struggled to maintain his fake smile and lie through his teeth. It was a sick, twisted game, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was the one in control. I also made sure to help him with his bachelor party plans, subtly suggesting he put down non-refundable deposits on an incredibly expensive villa and private jet, using his own credit just for now, until the trust fund kicked in. He was so sure of the payout that he spent money he didn't even have yet, convinced he was weeks away from being a billionaire. I even suggested he buy gifts for his friends, including a gold watch for Jackson, all on credit. He was digging his own grave, and I was just handing him the shovel with a smile. The psychological toll on me was immense. Pretending to love a man I loathed was exhausting. Every time he tried to kiss me, I felt like my skin was crawling, but I kept the image of that Porsche and his mocking laugh in my mind to keep me steady. I started taking secret trips to the wedding venue, not to plan flowers, but to map out the acoustics and the tech setup. So that is where things stood. I was weeks away from the wedding, and I had everything in place to ruin him financially, socially, and emotionally. I had the high-quality recordings of his conversation with Jackson from the study, and I had the legal documents that would leave him in debt for decades. But as the day approached, I started to hesitate. I spent nights staring at myself in the mirror, wondering if I was becoming the monster he claimed I was. Was I letting my appearance define my worth by seeking such a dark, calculated revenge? Was I no better than him? I was being used for my body and my bank account by the one person I trusted, but the weight of the sabotage was heavy. I wondered if I should just ghost him and leave the country. But then I remembered the way he called me a job. A gross job. I want you to really think about this before I tell you how the wedding day went down, and it was a total bloodbath. I want you to pause right now. This is a huge crossroad. Go to the comments and tell me. Would you have just walked away quietly and found someone better? Or would you have stayed to make sure he paid for every cruel, soul-crushing word he said behind your back? What would you do if you were in my shoes? The day of the wedding arrived, and it was the most beautiful, expensive lie I've ever seen. It was a lavish affair held at a historic cathedral, exactly what Mark wanted for his coming out into high society. He wanted the prestige, the cameras, and the powerful guests. He had invited every influential person he knew, hoping to cement his status as the new prince of the city. The church was packed with his friends, his smug family who looked at me with the same hidden disdain, and my father's high-profile business associates. Mark stood at the altar in a $5,000 tuxedo, looking like the cat who ate the canary, probably already calculating the interest on the money he thought he was about to inherit. I walked down the aisle, but instead of a traditional sheer veil, I wore a heavy, thick antique lace that completely obscured my face. The guests whispered. They thought it was a stylistic choice or a quirky move from the shy girl. I didn't care. I felt like a ghost walking toward its executioner. When I reached the altar, I could feel Mark's hand trembling as he took mine, but I knew it wasn't from love. It was from excitement for the prize. The priest began the ceremony, and it was agonizingly long. Every word about honor and cherishing felt like a slap in the face. When it came time for the vows, Mark gave this long, scripted, cinematic speech. He talked about how true beauty is only skin deep, and how he was the luckiest man alive because he saw the real Maya when no one else did. It was nauseating. He even squeezed my hand for dramatic effect when he mentioned my inner light. He looked at the cameras, making sure they caught his sincere expression. When it was my turn, the room went dead silent. I didn't reach for my vows. Instead, I reached into my bouquet and pulled out a small, sleek remote. I had spent the morning paying off the AV technician to ensure the church's massive projector system, the one they use for hymns and funeral montages, was connected directly to my phone's audio and video output. I pressed play. The entire cathedral fell into a vacuum of silence as Mark's voice, amplified by the high-end speakers, filled every corner of the room. I just closed my eyes and think about the Porsche, I just tell her she's naturally beautiful, and she eats it up like a hungry dog. The recording didn't just play the audio. I had also managed to get a video of him that night through a hidden security camera in the study. The guests saw him laughing, saw him making gagging gestures when talking about my face, and heard him describe me as a transaction. I even added clips of him lying to me over the past few weeks, juxtaposed with his real thoughts. The gasps from the audience were like a physical wave. My father stood up, his face turning a shade of red I'd never seen. Mark turned white as a sheet, his jaw literally dropping. He tried to grab the remote, but my father's security team, who I had fully briefed that morning, stepped forward like a wall of granite. I slowly reached up and pulled back my veil, looking him right in the eye. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to hide. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a judge. I leaned into the microphone. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said, my voice echoing, steady and cold as ice. "I am desperate. I was desperate for the truth. And now that everyone knows the truth about what a pathetic, hollow parasite you are, I think we can skip the I do's. Oh, and by the way, the investment papers you signed? The company filed for Chapter 7 an hour ago. You're broke, Mark. Your credit is ruined, your villa is cancelled, and you're officially banned from my father's buildings and every company we influence." I turned around and walked out of that church. I didn't run. I walked. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in my life, I felt light. I could hear the chaos behind me, my father yelling, Jackson trying to explain himself, and Mark's mother fainting in the pews. It was the most satisfying music I'd ever heard. But the revenge didn't stop at the church doors. The investments he had signed for? They collapsed exactly as planned. Because he had signed those personal guarantees, the banks and creditors came for everything he owned. His car, his luxury apartment, his meager savings, all seized. He had even used his parents' house as collateral for part of the loan he took to fund his lifestyle. And they lost everything too. He tried to sue me for emotional distress and fraud. But the documents he signed were ironclad. And since he had no money left for a lawyer, his case was laughed out of court. He became a social pariah overnight. The video of his vows went viral in our city's business circles. No one would hire a man who was caught being that vile. Especially not someone who had tried to scam the daughter of one of the most powerful men in real estate. Last I heard, he moved 2 states away to live in his parents' basement, and is working an entry-level job at a call center where no one has to see his face, which is ironic. Jackson didn't escape either. I made sure his firm received a copy of the video, and he was fired for misconduct and bringing the company into disrepute. As for me, I didn't hide in my room. I took the millions I would have spent on the wedding and the honeymoon, and I went on a solo trip around the world. I hiked in Nepal, I swam in the Mediterranean, and I met people who didn't know my story or my father. I found people who looked at my eyes and my smile before they looked at my skin. I stopped wearing heavy makeup to hide my scars. I stopped letting my hair fall over my face like a curtain. I realized that the only thing ugly in that entire relationship was his soul. My scars are still there, and they always will be, but they don't feel like a burden anymore. They feel like armor. They are a reminder that I survived his cruelty and came out stronger. I spent months in a small village in Italy, learning to paint and realizing that art, like people, doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. I lost a fiancé, but I found a version of myself that doesn't need a man's lies to feel worthy. I've started a foundation to help young girls with visible differences gain the confidence they need to navigate a world that is often obsessed with the surface. We provide counseling, skin treatments that are actually safe and effective, and most importantly, a community where they don't have to hide. My father is proud of me, not for the money I saved him, but for the strength I found. Elena and I have even grown closer. She admitted she always envied my resilience, while I envied her beauty. We realized we were both just trying to survive the boxes people put us in. This whole experience taught me that the people who try to make you feel small are usually the smallest people themselves. I spent years hiding because I was afraid of what people would think of my face, but the moment I stopped caring about the opinions of people like Mark, I became more powerful than he could ever imagine. I don't regret a single thing I did to him. He wanted a transactional marriage, and he got exactly the deal he deserved. If you ever find yourself being put down or used by someone who is supposed to love you, remember that you have the power to walk away. And if they've been truly monstrous, you have the power to dismantle the pedestal they built for themselves. You are more than the skin you're in. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a seat at your table. Like this video if you were on my side. And think Mark got exactly what was coming to him. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far with the wedding day reveal? Or was it the only way to truly handle a snake like him? Would you have been as patient as I was? Or would you have snapped sooner? I'll see you all in the next story.